If you're haunted and harassed by your own inner critic, if you've ever been curious about why hypnosis works so well, if you're a seasoned hypnotist, or if you suspect that the inner critic is actually hypnotizing you to hold back from reaching the greatness that you know deep down is inside you, lean in and get inspired to get out of your comfort zone and create your one precious life with purpose and intention. If you like this show, you'll love my powerful hypnosis audio, The Answer Room, because it gives you crystal clear guidance and direction and illuminates an ingenious way to make triumphant decisions, no matter how stuck you feel or how confused you were. This powerful hypnosis audio is my gift to you when you go to theimpostermonster.com. Again, that's theimpostermonster.com. Don't forget theimpostermonster.com. And yes, I'm done saying it. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening. I'm Lori Hammond, and I'm truly grateful for you. Welcome, everyone. I am so excited for today's podcast. This is a man who I have been following for several years and have learned so much from. Dr. David Snyder has personally trained members of the legal professional law enforcement, entertainment, martial arts, and hypnosis communities, teaching advanced mind-body technologies for peak performance and persuasion, rapid healing, relationships, and more. He's a certified hypnosis trainer, master practitioner, and trainer in neurolinguistic programming. A member of the Society of Experiential Trance, David tirelessly works to develop training and educational opportunities designed to powerfully raise the skill level and professional status of hypnotists all over the world. He is the founder and creator of the CPI, Conversational Persuasion and Influence System. In addition to his many credentials, he is in the field of hypnosis and NLP. David holds a Master of Arts degree in acupuncture and Oriental medicine from Southern California University of Health Sciences, where he pioneered the use of hypnotic technique in combination with acupuncture therapy and ninth degree black belt in the martial arts. David, welcome. I am so happy to have you here.
It is an honor to be here, Lori. Thank you so much.
I'm just going to let you decide where we start. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background? Maybe talk to us about, you and I have been having an incredible conversation off camera about ways that we can equip people who are maybe a little bit nervous to start practicing the skills that they've learned in hypnosis. So I'll just let you jump in and start wherever you'd like.
Well, first and foremost, hypnosis is a skill set, right? And one of the things that we have to do is we have to find opportunities to practice those skills. Now, there's two kinds, in Planet David, as I lovingly call it. Now, I can bring my bio up to date if you want. I actually have a doctorate in Oriental medicine now, and we train people all over the world. Last year, I was named the number one NLP trainer in the world by globalgurus.org for 2020. And my program, my influence program, Killer Influence, which we're going to probably rename to something like Charisma and Personal Magnetism or something, so I stopped getting banned on the search engines, was named the number one NLP training product, of course, in the world, also by globalgurus.org, which is kind of funny for me because I never promoted Killer Influence as an NLP training program. They just compared it to everything out there and said, this is awesome, and poof, there it was. So for those of you who are interested in that, I'm happy to give you information on that. But today's topic is something that is actually, Lori didn't know this, but was actually very near and dear to my heart. And that is raising the competency and the confidence level of hypnotists everywhere. My program that I've been running since about 2012 was when I decided to start certifying people. And I was telling Lori, and I think there's a clip that maybe we might edit into this a little bit later on, where I talk about that for 10 years, I taught this stuff for free because I wasn't concerned about putting out students. I was concerned that people were getting certified that didn't have any skills and couldn't get the things they paid good money. They weren't able to do the things they paid good money to learn how to do. And that's something that everyone I know, with very few exceptions, when they come out of a training in hypnosis or NLP for that matter, they have those feelings in the back of their mind. So when you come out of those trainings, you're not alone. There's a part of us that will always feel like we don't know enough yet. That's normal. Okay. And then from that moment on, people separate into two groups that I've discovered. Okay. And this, you may resonate with this, you may not. I call them the chronically overtrained and the achievers. Now, they both have a lot of things in common. They're usually very smart people. They're usually very passionate. They usually believe that there's always more to learn, right? Here's where the difference happens. The achievers know there's always more to learn, but they have enough to start. So they do. And they start gaining real world experience from that knowledge base. The chronically overtrained also realize there's always more to learn, but they can't start until they're done. But they're never done. So they never start. And so within certain contexts, these people can perform. But when they're flying without a net, when there's no training wheels, when they're out in the real world, they have to get their own state under control before they can perform. And so I realized very early on that if you're going to move through the world as a hypnotist, you're an agent of transformation, you're an agent of change. You need to be able to deploy these skills anytime, anywhere, under any circumstances, for any reason. And so when I looked at where my colleagues and my peers and the students were at and what they wanted versus what they were getting, I said, we got to change something. Something's got to happen. And I knew right off the bat, I wasn't going to change the hypnosis industry. I wasn't going to change how people were doing their thing, because it would actually it would create more work for the trainers, which most of us want to find easy. We want to deliver less. Now, it's a very weird conundrum. But so I just decided I'm going to do this my way. And people who resonate with my F-bombs and my weird vests and, this take no bullshit, get it done no matter what kind of an energy, they're going to self-select for the process. And so I just started doing my own thing. I didn't really pay a lot of attention to what was going on in the hypnosis world for many years. In fact, it wasn't until about, I think HypnoThoughts actually started, I moved to San Diego about 2005. And things really started to roll down here in terms of my little, as Scott likes to call it, the David Empire. Right around 2007 or 8 is when things started to I started going back into these ideas of doing free events and trainings and bringing and teaching skill sets, largely because I was bored off my butt and I wanted to get better. And one of the fastest ways to get really, really good, really, really quick on something you think is to teach it.
Yes.
Right. And so we started doing these events down here, and about 2012 is when I was talking about my friend James, who pulled me by the ear and said, "Hey, you got to start certifying people." We can edit that clip in there, or we can talk about it again, whatever.
Yeah, will you talk about it again?
Sure. I've been teaching hypnosis and NLP related disciplines from my time in LA back in 2002, I guess, all the way up through. So I moved to San Diego in 2005, and then I went kind of underground when my first digital product kind of took off, and I was focusing on my practice down there, and I was working on my online business and things like that. About 2007 or 8, I was asked to teach again. Somebody who'd found one of my online products said, "Hey, he found out I was in San Diego. Somehow he tracked my ass down, and he called me and he said, "Hey, would you be willing to do a group? Would you, do a free event like you talk about?" And I was like, and he kept asking and kept asking. And by the way, his name was Mark Stein. So give him the credit. He's the reason I'm back on the world stage. So Mark pulled me out, and I started teaching, and the passion came back. The bug was still there. It didn't go away after all the political fallout that I'd gone through and things of that nature. And I just started teaching. I meet up here, I meet up there. Eventually in 2010, I guess it was, my meetups had gotten so popular that we decided to create a paid version, which was the NLP Power Mastermind Mentoring Program, which you hear me advertise from time to time. You had to pay for it, but it was a group that was devoted strictly to skill building. You weren't going to get a certificate out of it, right? And so, and the way it would work is literally at the beginning of each segment, I would go to Lori, what do you want to learn today? James, what do you want to learn today? Mark, what do you want to learn today? Jamin, what do you want to learn? Luis, what do you want to learn? Jennifer, what do you want to learn? We had, by the way, for some strange, bizarre reason, fun factoid, there seemed to be a preference for J names. Like out of 10 people, 7 would have a name that began with J. It was a very weird thing. And it went on for years, right? Sidebar. Anyway, so 2010 rolls around. I launched this group. And by the way, that group is still going today.
Wow.
It's the longest running paid practice group. And it's literally the same thing. What do you want to learn? What do you want to learn? What do you want? I write them all up on the board. I find where they all kind of connect and intersect. I create a lesson plan on the spot, and I drill you on those topics until you can do them in your sleep.
That's so valuable.
We're still doing that. It's 11 years later. We're still doing that on the third Saturday of every month. And we've videotaped every single session and we've archived it. So again, I learned early on, record every single thing that you do. Nothing you do is wasted, right? If you set up a meeting or a meetup or an event and one person shows up, you teach the event and you record it, because each piece you do, this is marketing, everything can be repurposed.
I love that.
Everything can be repurposed. The reason I dominate on YouTube is because I had this 5 or 6 year archive of videos that were doing nothing. I told myself I was going to make a product, I was going to do this, I was going to do that, and I just never got around to it. And one day I just looked at all that stuff, like taking up literally terabytes of information. I was like, you know what? I'm not doing anything with this. I might as well just upload it and see what happens. 3 years later, I got 10,000 subscribers, right? And they're binge watching long videos.
Yeah,
right.
I did it.
Right. I still hear Stephanie, we all know Stephanie from Hypnothoughts. She makes this joke. It's like every day I get a call from somebody. I've just watched David for the last 3 days. Right. Right. So be warned, the videos seem to be habit forming. I'm not sure why that is, but anyway, so, what was happening though, was at that time, I was still refusing to certify people. And so my friend James Situ, who's one of the founding members, he's one of Richard Nongard's trainers. He trains for the ICDCH now. He literally pulled me by the ear and said, look, dude, you got to start certifying people. And I go, why? He goes, because they're coming to you to get the skill set, because you're not giving them a certification. They're going to all these other guys getting certified and saying, these guys are the ones who taught them. And I was like, okay, fine. But this is how it's going to be. We're going to design a training program. It's going to be, they either perform or they don't get their certificate. It's my way or the highway, right? Because I didn't want to be part of, here's your check, here's your certificate, see you next life, right? Or see you at the next training. Or I'd seen it. I'd seen too much of it, for many years. And I have respect for all the organizations out there. I don't think, for some of them, I think they know what they're doing, in terms of shortchanging the students. But I think a lot of them truly believe that they're offering the best approach,
right,
to educating people. The problem is they're educating, but they're not preparing them. And the way you prepare people is you throw them in the situations and you make them perform. It's not comfortable. It's not pretty. But when you realize that that's actually what's normal, you're much more willing to deploy your skills in weird situations.
And this lines up with your 3x3 protocol. Will you talk about that a little bit? Sure. Because I think this is the key. This is what people need. Yeah.
There's a couple of things that go along with 3x3, but let's start with that basic idea. Neurologically speaking, you don't own a piece of information until you've done it at least 3 times. So our protocol is very simple. For every technique that you learn in our training, and this is a process that if you're willing to add the extra time to your trainings or teach a little bit less content so you have more time for repetitions, this is something that will significantly amplify the confidence and the competency level of any of your students. So here's how it works. For every technique that you're shown, you must do it at least 3 times as the subject, 3 times as the operator, right? And what we did after a couple of years of this, we started to see a significant bump in a person's willingness to engage in hypnosis anywhere, right?
Yes.
What we started doing was we wanted to drive this realization that they actually could do this home even more solidly. And so what we instituted a year or two later, a couple of years later, is we started having people, we gave people at the beginning of every training a tally sheet that had a list of techniques, and then there was space to write in the names of techniques. And so what you had to do was, for every technique you were shown, when you broke up, you had to mark how many reps you did as the subject, how many reps you did as the operator. And if there was an observer segment, you had to mark how many times you observed. And you would put out, instead of regular hash marks, you would use a Y if you got the result you were going for, and an N if you didn't get the result that you were going for. It still counted as a rep, but now what happened is that you started to log not just how many reps you did, but how successful, how often you were successful getting the result in that technique. And so, and on the last day before lunch, you had to turn in the sheet with the minimum number of repetitions. And you were, and at that time, at that moment, if the vast, depending on how many people didn't have all their reps done, we wouldn't teach any more technique. You had to spend the rest of the day catching up on your reps, right? And people became rabid because we're cognitive gluttons. We want more stuff.
Yes.
Right. But we also had to find a way to make it fun and accountable. Right. And every now and then, because there's when people walk into a hypnosis class and the first time you demo the first induction, they get right. And then you watch as they go through the 5 days, how the thing they thought was the most difficult, terrifying, they're like, why was this ever hard? Mm-hmm. Right. And they're doing these complicated hypnotic processes that would make most veterans like cringe as a first week trainee. And they're being successful with it because of this 3x3 protocol and the idea of no scripts. All right. We give you a set of bullet points, get the change no matter what, because it forces you to rely on you.
That idea of no scripts is so awesome. And tell me if this is an okay place to segue, because you mentioned in a training that I just heard you do with Mike Mandel, mm-hmm. the importance of changing your state and of setting an intention at the beginning of a session with a client, or, whatever it is that you're doing. And then if you stumble over your words, and if you say the wrong thing, and if you leave something out, it tends to be okay because you've done those 2 key things first. Would you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Here's the thing that most hypnotists really need to understand. And you don't got to believe it. Just play with this attitude and see how it works for you. Here's the thing. 2 things. A, when it comes to hypnosis, you never fail until you quit. You understand that? Okay. Hypnosis, the practice of hypnosis, is the sloppiest, easiest, most forgiving, most user-friendly form of change work that exists in history. You can screw it up 9 times, fix it on the 10th, just keep talking and no one will ever know or care. Okay. That's it. There's nothing, unless you stop, you quit, you run away, you can't fail. Just keep going, because the feedback from the subject will tell you where you need to go. If you're paying attention to the subject, which you can't do if you're trying to look at a script or operate from a memorized script. The most powerful hypnotic operator that we have is the line of attention and connection that runs from the hypnotist to the client. And as long as you're paying attention, you will get, and you ask questions, you will get the information that you need to get that client where they need to be, right? You don't need a script. You just need to be relentless and pay attention, which you can't do if you're looking at a script. And by the way, just as a when you're when you're a client in a session, the last thing the client wants to hear is this. Okay, so
I'm
keep that
so
in mind.
intrigued that you just went and pulled a book out of your virtual background.
It's because it's not, well, this is actually a picture of my actual bookcase.
I thought it might be. It's so awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm surrounded by books, even though this bookcase that you see behind me is downstairs. It's about 25% of my big library downstairs. But I'm actually surrounded by books right now upstairs too as well. So when people ask me for my reading list, you better strap in because it's big, right? But this is again the format that most hypnotists and neurolinguistic programmers go through follows this format. They go into a class. The instructor stands up in front of the class. He introduces himself or herself, gives you the bio. They start that. They go theory. They bring somebody up. They demo, and then they say, "Okay, go do it." So you do it once as the subject, once as the practitioner. You're back to lecture. Wash, rinse, repeat. It's not enough. It's RAM learning. In other words, the minute you sleep, it goes away, right? But if you can get somebody to actually do the processes at least 3 times, even if they miss a step and they're focused on the client, the processes will usually still work anyway. In fact, I tell people when, again, because I have a class that is designed just for people who can't even spell hypnosis, right? I tell my students, I said, look, you're going to keep asking the same 2 questions over and over again. You're going to ask, did I do it right? And you're going to ask me, were they deep enough? The answer to both questions is the same. Student comes up to me, goes, I don't know if I did it right. The first thing I'm going to ask you is, did you get the results you were looking for? If the answer is yes, then you did it right, right? I don't know if they were deep enough. Did you get the result you were going for? Well, yeah, then they were deep enough, right?
For someone who's maybe brand new to this idea, maybe they've just certified or they're moving through a certification, will you expand upon the idea of paying attention? When a person is really paying attention to this subject, what are they watching for? How do they know when to shift direction?
Okay, first and foremost, let's talk about something that I kind of evolved to and then codified about 5 or 6 years ago. And I call this the dynamics of an unconscious response. And it goes like this. There's 6 basic understandings that we as hypnotists have to have first and foremost. And then if we translate these or transfer these to the client's understanding, it will dramatically reduce our need to have to prove this shit actually works to the client. And that's this, the unconscious 6 dynamics of an unconscious response. The unconscious mind always answers first. Okay. Many times it's non-verbally. And that's why the first second to half a second before the words come out of a person's mouth are oftentimes the most critical seconds in terms of understanding what the unconscious mind is transferring to you versus what the critical faculty wants you to hear, right? Because that's what part of the critical faculty's job is to change the internal narrative to be justifiable to the external world, right? That's why we call it the rational lying brain. It's designed to make up reasons for why you're the way you are that have many times nothing to do with the truth, right? But that's the job of the neocortex. The neocortex evolved so we could exist in a social community. And so it rationalizes, and it rationalizes to ourselves and it rationalizes differently to the external world. But the real reasons we do something are always at the reptilian or the mammalian level, and it always comes out in a nonverbal response first. So as a hypnotist, we're talking to the boss, which is the reptile brain and the mammalian brain. That's what I call it, talking to the boss, right? So I'm going to pay attention to what the boss has to say. When people come in and they start giving me these long histories, right? I put this compassionate look on my face. I give them empathic statements that mirror that I hear them. All the while I'm waiting for them to shut up so I can talk to the guy who's actually in charge, right? Because people need to feel heard, and that's absolutely important to the therapeutic process. But at the end of the day, the client doesn't actually know why they're screwed up consciously. They think they know, which we call the presenting problem. So you let them vent that emotional charge, you get them to the point where they're ready to do the change work, and then you go and you talk to the boss, which is always the unconscious mind. Unconscious mind always answers first. It always answers honestly. Okay. from the client's perspective, it always feels like they're making it up.
Yes. When they say, this is really silly, but I know I've hit on the jackpot.
So if you inform your client about this phenomenon before it actually hits, it amplifies your authority and credibility in their world, because it perfectly matches their internal experience. And because you pre-framed the phenomena they encountered, they know what to do next, right? Because if you don't let them know that it always feels like you're making it up, they invalidate it. They don't realize that that's truth, and they don't know to say, oh, that was weird, but okay, I'll go with that, right? And it's a subtle thing, but many times people come out of trance saying, I feel like I was just making that up, like I was just playing along, right? Well, yeah, the part of you that has all access to your long-term memories, that runs your body, is also the part that makes shit up. So they're going to have a similar quality to it. But if you tell them that on the back end, it seems like you're trying to justify, as opposed to letting them know what they're going to encounter. So timing, primacy is a very big deal. You can still mitigate the damage by telling them these things on the back end, but if you just front load them with it on the at the beginning of a session, you're going to have a significantly easier time, because they're going to be much more compliant and much more willing to follow instructions, because you actually demonstrated a level of expertise, because you told them what they were going to experience before it actually happened, right? So the unconscious mind always answers first. It always answers honestly. It always feels like you're making it up. You always have an urge to edit what just came up. Those two almost always go hand in hand. Something comes up and the conscious mind, the critical faculty goes, oh, that's not right, or that can't be true, right? Well, the moment you catch yourself doing that, you know right then and there, that's where you need to go. And you tell the client that, because it's going to happen, especially if you're doing any kind of regression, right? It's going to happen. So poof, that can't be, what? How did that, and then all of a sudden, David said, or Lori said that was going to happen. Holy cow, this must be working. All right, we'll follow that and see where it goes, right? And then finally, it's almost never loud. It's almost any communications from the subconscious mind are almost always quiet, off in the distance, like a whim or a notion in the back of your mind. I forget which famous philosopher or therapist said that the conscious mind shouts, the unconscious mind whispers, and it's true enough to be true, right? And then finally, it's never linear. And this comes up probably more often in forms of regression than anything else. When you say, go back to the first scene, situation, or event that is the source, the beginning, the root of XYZ problem. They came into you for a breakout in neck pain that happened when they were 35. All of a sudden, they're 5 years old watching their mom and dad argue in the living room. What? Right? From the conscious mind's perspective, looking backward, that shit never makes sense. But from the unconscious mind's perspective, moving forward, they see all the connections. And so that's the basis of regression, is that we don't exist in linear time. We have an illusion of linear time. And so when the unconscious mind organizes events, that it does it by what they have in common. It could be a context, it could be a lighting fixture. It's not linear. But when we get back to that original source, the root, and we look forward, we see the path through all of those other events, and it seems linear. But at the end of the day, going back to what I started with, talk to the boss, pay attention, and ask questions.
And talk to the boss as the body. You're watching the way the body responds to the words you're saying, and probably the words the client is saying back to you.
Mm-hmm. And think of it this way, all right? As hypnotists, we are I'm going to piss off some psychotherapists out in the world, but such is life. The subconscious mind is our happy place, right? As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to people who understand and work and can influence the subconscious mind, hypnotists are at the top of the pyramid, followed very closely by neurolinguistic programmers, okay? And then maybe a little bit of CBT, right? That's just how I see it. HMR is right in there with hypnosis and NLP. But ironically, when you watch a hypnotist working with a client, this is what it looks like. This is the client. All right, and that's normal. That's normal for classically trained hypnotists. We expect you to be vegetative in the chair in most cases, right? But here's the thing: and this has really started to gel for me after I was starting to learn, actually when we started creating the identity by design process, which has its origins and again, we can talk about that because it's actually directly germane to getting hypnotists super competent, super quick. But you don't have to use my process, my system to do it. Just apply the training elements I'm talking about, and you'll have a significant bump in your confidence level. But one of the things I discovered from acupuncture, my acupuncture days in Los Angeles, up to when I started teaching identity by design, was that the greatest chunk, what's the greatest piece of the subconscious mind? It's your body, right? Everything that's unconscious about you, that's not non-local, is in the meat. And yet, when we as hypnotists are performing our work, we're leaving a huge chunk of this unconscious real estate untouched, unutilized. And so the more we can get the body engaged in the change work, the more divisions of that neurology we light up. We cognitively as well as somatically absorb them in a process. We're speaking a language that every division of the nervous system understands. So we're marshaling a massive, this is why we get, if you watch some of our processes on YouTube or whatever, this is one of the reasons why we get changed so deeply, so quickly, is because we're not just tapping into one or two parts of the brain that activate in a hypnotic trance. We're activating those and everything else. But they're all synergized and oriented to a specific outcome, speaking a language that all the divisions understand. And so you get a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. So I think I open loop myself on that. What was the actual question I was supposed to answer?
I don't know, because I feel like we're going where we're supposed to go. So
Okay.
whatever that open loop is, anyone who's listening, you're going to need to sign up for David's trainings at the end to close that loop. But
Okay.
I don't know if this is an appropriate place to interject either, but I've always wanted to tell you this story. So I started my training with Mike Mandel. I'm going through the Hypnosis Academy and just like binge watching these videos, taking pages and pages of notes. And I thought, what else is out there? So I do a search for hypnosis trainings, and guess whose YouTube channel comes up. And so then I am that person just binge watching David Snyder videos and watching spinning techniques. And so very shortly after I completed my certification, I knew that I would never really do it because I had tried to kind of start some entrepreneurial things on the side while I was also a hairstylist. And I knew that I had to push myself out of the nest if I was going to actually do it. And so I had actually just quit my job and I was just starting to do this full time. By full time, I mean, I didn't have any clients yet. But my brother, what's that?
It starts with the decision.
Yeah, it really does. And I think, yeah, anyway, one of my first clients was a young man who had a heroin addiction. And you mentioned something like this on Mike Mandel's training. And I was terrified. I didn't think I could help him, but I said, sure, I can help. And we chatted and we talked for like an hour and a half. And I'm just psyching myself up and convincing him that this is going to work. And underneath of that addiction was a phobia. And I had him associate into that feeling, that fear, that phobia, and take it out and spin it. And I David Snydered it. And that gentleman never went back to drugs again from just talking to the body and just removing that feeling from the body. And I remember thinking, are you kidding me? It worked.
I still have that. I've been teaching that technique now since 2005. That's where I got it, by the way. I know people think I got my spinning stuff from Richard. I didn't start studying officially with Richard until after 2012. I got that whole technique as a download. I know exactly where I was. I know exactly when it was. I was in Jerry Kind's hypnotherapy training in DeLand, Florida. And ironically, there was this really hot blonde chick from Canada that I wanted to impress. And she was talking about having a headache or something like that. And boom, I got this download. And I said, point to where you feel it. And she goes, what? I go, point to where you feel it. She goes, point. I said, now look at it. And she looks at it. And I say, now close your eyes, look at it with your inner eyes. I said, notice there's a color connected to that feeling. What's the color? First impression. She goes, red. I go, take all that red energy out, take it out and hold it in your hands in front of you. Make sure you get it all. right? So she reaches in, says, okay, now as you look at it, did the color change or stay the same? First impression. She goes, it's the same. Okay, excellent. Notice it's moving. It's spinning in a certain direction. What direction is it spinning? She goes, this way. I say, grab it with both of your hands. Make it the opposite of what it was. Now double the spin, double the speed, double the force, double the magnitude. Keep doubling it over and over and over again until it takes on a life of its own, until it's impossible for it to go back the way it was. When you know you've got it, slam it back into that spot. She slams it back in. I clap my hands over her own hands. I think I swiped her gallbladder and her triple warmer, as well as her conception and her governing vessel. And then I just held my hands there, and she like shook for a few seconds, and she went, it's gone. I said, bye. Right? Because I was nervous. She was too hot, and I didn't want to, I ran out of shit to say. But that was, I didn't know what I had when I got it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what that thing could do. But when the universe gives you something, you're expected to do something with it.
Yes.
And that's also true for any single one of you that is drawn to hypnosis, right? You are drawn to hypnosis because there's a part of you that knows this is where you need to be, right? And you went into that training with the intention either to fix your own shit, which by the way is why 90% of the people who go to a hypnosis training are there. They're not actually there to help to fix other people yet. They want to fix their own shit first, right? So we built that into our training. It's like, that's why you walk in on day one, you start fixing your own shit from the time you walk in, right? And you do it through this 3x3 step process where you have to track your reps. And then periodically we just have people stop and look at their tally sheet and count how many times you actually hypnotize somebody in the period of time you've been there, and how many times you actually succeeded. Because that's what stops us. We don't have a track record in our heads of the number of times we've actually hypnotized somebody, and B, how many times we've done it successfully. There will always be outliers like you, Laura. You took the bull by the horns. You had little to no practical experience, but you did something that most people don't. Let's just see what happens, right? And yeah, you were a little on the terrified side, but you channeled, you sucked it up. You became your inner David, or whatever it was, whatever word you put to it. You summoned your inner Mike or your inner Thompson or whatever it was, and you just did the work, right? And poof, the result happened. And that's a lot of what we've tried to do with our techniques and things of that nature. We've tried to distill them down to pure mechanics where you don't even have to believe it. You just got to do it. We actually preface a lot of the stuff that we teach with that. You don't have to believe this. Your client doesn't have to believe this. Just do it and watch what happens.
And
right?
You say, if you play along, it can't not work. That was something that's like another thing that I've memorized that I learned from you.
It's again, there's a story behind that. Right now, most of you guys, if you want to hear it, I'll tell it. If not,
I would love to hear it. Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm in acupuncture school. Now, most of you guys know, did get, by the way, the bio you were reading was kind of old. I actually have my 10th degree black belt now. So they decided I was good enough, apparently. So, so I'm in acupuncture school. I think it's my third semester or third trimester. So we're doing all these practical examinations. And I was getting ready to do my practical exam for Tui Na, which is Chinese massage, right? Therapeutic massage. And I had forgotten about the exam, and it was a practical. So I had to demonstrate like shoulder, hip, and low back, I think is what I had to demonstrate. But I didn't have a partner, and I hadn't practiced. So I'm standing in line. There's like 10 or 15 people ahead of me. So I've got maybe 20, 30 minutes before I'm up. But I got no partner, and I barely remembered the protocols. And I knew I was going to have to demonstrate this. So I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And I just got another download. Now, I'm a martial artist. I've been a martial artist since I was 15 years old. In the martial arts, we have a practice known as kata or forms. And basically what a kata is it's a prearranged set of movements designed to teach you proper stance, balance, but it's also designed to teach you how to integrate your imagination into what you're doing physically. So for some weird reason, I still don't know to this day why I decided to do this. I'm surrounded by people and standing in a line. I'm like, well, I don't have a partner. What if I just imagine I have one? So I imagine someone sitting there, and I start working the shoulder, and I start working on the, the leg, and I lost track of time. 20 minutes goes by. I wake up in this line, surrounded by people going, covered in, I got so absorbed in what I was doing to something that wasn't there, even though I knew it wasn't there, that I just went into this profound hypnotic state. I did my drill, I aced my exam, right? And that's when I started to realize that when the body's engaged, it's just a matter of time before the rest of the neurology follows. So you don't have to believe it. You just have to mechanically do the motions. And if you do them long enough, it's usually not very long at all, it will overwrite the rest of what the neurology wants to do.
And that's even what you're doing with your 3x3. That's almost the kata that you're bringing your students through. They're memorizing, doing these protocols in their physiology as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that is so cool.
Every single technique that we do, especially in Identity by Design, has physical components. In fact, there are 3 building blocks to all the techniques that we do. The first is somatic engagement. In other words, you're going to get the body interacting, whatever, constructive metaphor. There's always going to be some kind of an imaginary construct that you're going to somatically engage with, and then a strategic suggestion, how to artfully use your language to sew all these things together. And the last thing we teach you is conversational hypnosis, because if you can't get change speaking like you would to a 3rd grader, there's no amount of hypnotic language that's going to help you, right? The simple truth is, if you can give simple, clear instructions, pay attention, and just ask the right questions, you can get any change you want. And that's what it is. As long as the client can understand you, they can follow you, right? There's only 2 reasons why your clients don't do what you want them to do. They don't want to, or they don't want to. The question becomes, why? Why don't they want to? Well, it usually distills down to 2 categories. Either they don't understand you, or they're afraid. Right? And then every other excuse you have for not going into trance stems from one of those issues, right? Sometimes it's not that they can't understand you, it's they can't relate to you. It's because the words you're using don't match their world, because they're too big, which is a problem that many neurolinguistic programmers have. NLP is a discipline that attracts very, very smart, educated, erudite people. And that's a problem, because
I agree.
The vast majority of people that you're dealing with don't speak like that. And so they can't relate to the words that you're using. And it's laden with jargon, which most people don't understand either. So we have to be effective in neurolinguistics, we have to use smaller words, right? To be a great hypnotist, you don't got to know 7 hypnotic language patterns or 21 of the most powerful words in the human language. You got to be able to give simple, clear instructions and be willing to test the client to see that they've actually followed them.
I think sometimes we look for big words, and I used to be guilty of this, because as someone who loves to read, I love learning new words, and I'll look words up. And so I tried to utilize those words in my vocabulary, and I realized I was losing people. And when I was studying copywriting, I read that you should write to a 5th grader. And I think that a lot of our intelligence comes across by how smart we make the other person feel. And if we explain things in a simple language, it helps them feel smart instead of make us look like we're better than them or more knowledgeable than them.
Yeah. If they're coming to us for help, there's a presupposition that they think we have a level of expertise that they don't. We don't have to show it. But the goal is to as a hypnotist, as a neurolinguistic programmer, our job is to show people the genius inside of themselves, to lead them to realize that they're more competent, capable, and empowered than they thought, right? So they should come away feeling, oh my God, I didn't know I was this cool.
Yeah.
You know, and that's part of when we do our, like when I'm seeing clients, when we do our intake process, 80% of that is giving the client the experience of having control of their own neurology and guiding them through it. And ironically, even though you're showing them how to control their own body feelings, their own neurology, because you're the one guiding them, they assign it to you, right? Which makes it useful, because now they're much more willing to follow you through whatever process you want to guide them to. And at the end of the day, they come out realizing that they're far more than they expected. They're not a slave to these things, and that the shit they were dealing with was actually over. They just didn't know it.
That's brilliant. David, you mentioned that your Identity by Design program might be a good place to segue in this conversation. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, the Identity by Design process, which is now our flagship entry-level hypnotherapy course, and it takes you from 0 to hero in 5 days. It's designed to take people who can't even spell hypnosis, not even know if they can be hypnotized, and by the end of the first day, dropping people into instant and rapid inductions, guiding them through clearing their own shit, just the first day is nothing but what we call fun with hypnosis, where we just blow away all the mythology around what hypnosis is, that it's actually the easiest thing on the planet to do. And then we start building on that foundation, but it's experiential, right? And so the Identity by Design process is a sequence of techniques that we run people through therapeutically. When I and my clients work with people, we work in what we call silos. We don't just do one technique. We'll do a general negativity, then a special negativity clearing. We'll talk about those. We'll talk about default driver states, internal dialogue, sanitizing negativity from the past, and then installing a genetic template, as well as using deep trance identification to install the traits, characteristics, and attributes of people who we admire into our own personal template, so that we have those things. That seven sequence process is known as the Identity by Design silo. Now, one of the things that we discovered, again, you're looking for gold, you strike oil, uranium, and platinum all at the same time without realizing it. That particular process was actually designed and intended originally as an inner game workshop for aspiring pickup artists. It was designed to target the building blocks of a person's identity, so that they could become the person that could dress outlandishly and not look stupid, that could walk up to people and not feel terrified and feel like they're worthy and deserving, to move them forward in life, so that when they look back on the past, rather than seeing failure after failure after failure, they saw things that told them how worthy and deserving they were, and then it just built on that. But when we started actually utilizing it with clients, the scope and the depth of the transformations that people were undergoing and experiencing as a byproduct of that were just off the charts. And so we just took it into the clinic, right? And the beautiful thing about that particular sequence is that you can use it exactly like that, or you can like Lego, stick them together in any order that you want to create whatever effect you want. So we have two basic silos that we work from in our hypnotherapy training programs. We have what we call the general change work silo, which is 5 steps. And then you have the Identity by Design silo, which is 7, right? But both start the same way. We're going to clear general negativity. This is shit that you don't even know you have. You're just going to go in, and there's going to be this big room. You're going to pull shit off the walls that represent things that are just, you've accumulated, they're ready to go. The unconscious mind has just been waiting for an opportunity to get rid of them, and boom, they're going to burn them up and just you get rid of all this emotional weight. That's the most common response that people have when they go through like the gray room, which is a general negativity category, right? They kind of think, I feel so much lighter. It's because your emotional body is now significantly lighter than it was. A lot of times our physical weight, the weight in our physical body, is a mirror of the emotional weight that we're carrying around in the energy bodies. And so as you clear off this emotional debris, you start to feel lighter overall. And the nice thing about general negativity clearing is that it can get rid of the primary problems right off bat. And the closest analogy, to use a cooking metaphor, you know how sometimes you make French onion soup, and you have this amazing French onion soup, and when you're done eating the French onion soup, you look at the bowl, and there's this cement on the bowl that used to be cheese, right? Well, do you take that bowl and you throw it? If you're a bachelor, you might do this, but most of us don't just take that cheesed over bowl and throw it in the dishwasher, right? What do? We throw it in the sink, we fill it up with water, we soak the bowl, right? What does that do? A lot of stuff, the minute it gets rehydrated, it starts to break up, it comes off on its own, right? And then we can just scrub it a little bit, and all the stuff that was a little bit harder to get off is easier to remove. Now we put it in the dishwasher, and the cleaning process is easier, right? General negativity clearing works the same way. We can go in And the flagship technique for that, by the way, is what most people know as gray room. There are other techniques in that category. So when we look at the identity by design silo, we're not looking at a technique, we're looking at a category of technique. So the first one is general negativity clearing. Second one is special negativity clearing. These are events, emotions that we would commonly in hypnosis refer to as having a secondary gain to them, or some safety reason for why it's not okay to get rid of. We have a special process for preserving those safety lessons, so the system's willing to let the rest go. Then we're going to install default driver states. Most people are moving through the world in an emotional state that is neutral to negative at best. So we've identified 4 states that we want to act as defaults, that we want to install in you, that are positive, goal-oriented, and then you move through the world from these default places. And those states are relentless, playful, curious, and triumphant.
Wow.
Right? And we install these in you using a process called pillars of power. And then we give you special anchors that if anytime you need a little extra boost or you want to turn that up a notch, you just rub your magic ring or whatever, and poof, these things come flooding back to you. So if you're a hypnotist out in the field, you see someone about to melt down in the middle of an airport and you're not so sure if your state's quite right, change your posture, change your breathing, rub your magic ring, and make your approach and do your work. Then what we do is we actually systematically remove all the negative energy from your past experiences, right? So that when you do look back on the past, because this is something the unconscious mind is always going to do. Before your unconscious mind moves forward, it's going to look into the past to see if you've ever encountered this situation before. And it's going to frame and give you access or close off access to resources based on what it finds back there. One of the ways that it calibrates the gravity or the importance of an event is by the emotional charge connected to it. So when we go back and systematically remove the emotional charge from your negative events and transfer that energy into all of your positive events, all of a sudden there's this massive upload of positive feedback that you experience when you do that retro perspective before you move forward. So you feel better right away about moving forward. Then we take that whole sequence from general negativity clearing up to, we call it temporal editing. We compress it and we install it as a pre-genetic template, a la Bruce Lipton, before your very first memory. Because one of the things you need to understand as a hypnotist, pretty much all of your defense mechanisms are connected to your memories. So if I can move you to a place where your memories don't exist, or before you've had memories, there's no defense. So
David,
we install that. Go ahead.
I'm just so curious as you're describing this. I'm so intrigued, and I'm thinking, okay, I have to figure out how to sign up for this. But I'm curious, are you doing this like as a group, or is this the 3x3 where you teach and then people work one-on-one to do this? I'm just curious about the mechanism underneath. And I'm also thinking this could be something that a person who's been through this, through your identity by design, could then offer to clients as a series of, as a package, yes. Like a change your life package.
The answer is D, all of the above.
Wow.
In identity by design, you're taught the big picture, the silo. You're introduced to each stage of the identity by design process individually. You do each one 3x3. And then as you get closer and closer to the end of your session, you start doing the silos in sequence with a live human being working on real problems.
Wow. So
you get, I mean, back in 2015, when we first started rolling out this this tracking process, and we had one student. I just talk about this guy because he was a machine. He logged over 105 instant inductions in 5 days. That was one technique. Okay, that's more instant inductions than many of my colleagues have done in a career, right? Because it's all about the reps. And then finally, did you get the result or didn't you? If you get the reps, you'll get the skill set. Right. And you'll realize you'll relegate this from conscious competence to unconscious competence very, very quickly. But you still got to get the reps in. But we teach the process, we demo the process. There are certain points where I just hypnotically install and amplify the process. But those are pinstripes, bells and whistles to the actual process of doing each phase of the silo. And when you do that, you get a whole list greater than it transforms you. This is one of my big brags, but I'll point you at people who were there. Our class is on record. I think it was 12 or 15 people in the class They were doing change work in the lobby of a hotel, undergoing renovations, right next to a curtain behind which was a guy operating a jackhammer with 100% success.
Wow.
Anytime, anywhere, for any reason. The same class, 2015, that I was talking about, the guy did 105 instant inductions. There was one lady there. She was from Hawaii. Lovely, lovely woman, housewife. Had come to learn how to do these things so she could help her son deal with cancer. She's getting ready to go home from the training, and she's in line, and there's a gentleman ahead of him who was apparently a Gulf War veteran or something of that nature. He starts having a PTSD episode right in the middle of the airport. They're getting ready to call security on this guy. This lovely little lady, she wasn't old. She walks up, she goes, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. Would you like some help?" She goes, and he's like, "What?" "Point to where you feel it." She walked him through a spinning process. He took it out, spun it. His PTSD went away right in the middle of the airport. He followed her around the airport until it was time to get on the plane.
Wow.
Talked to her the entire time. And when they got off the plane in Hawaii, he handed her his Wounded Warrior jacket. Right? He was like, he anointed himself her protector the entire time.
Wow.
This is the power that you as a hypnotist have anytime, if you're willing, anytime, anywhere, for any reason, under any circumstances. And that's what I feel as a profession. Now, granted, we don't always want to do these things, but sometimes you're called upon. And when you're called, what are you going to do? Right? And so that's our goal. You know, I hope you never have to use these things in emergency situations. I hope you never find yourself between that rock and that hard place. But if you are, what's the level of your skill set today? Can you do the work? Right? And then once you've gone through identity by design and you're just this unstoppable, let's go see what happens kind of a person. If you decide you want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, if you're what I lovingly call a special kind of stupid, right? And you want to go deal with like intense traumas, addictions, and you can do that with the identity by design process. We teach you how to do those things, but there's a deeper level of emotional engagement and level of emotional management that is required for people who want to do really intense PTSD, addictions, terminal chronic illness, things of that nature. That's identity by design absolutely sets the groundwork for and gives you ability to do very advanced stuff very, very quickly. But when you're dealing with some of the most heinous shit human beings do to one another on the planet, you as a practitioner have to have a higher level of emotional poise and state control to navigate and manage those very provocative experiences. And so we have an advanced training we call real world trauma resolution, where we teach you the best of the old school and the new school approaches to deep, rapid transformation. But once again, we're going to throw you in the shit. We're going to expose you to some stuff that's just going to make you little puddles under your chair, and you're going to get to the point in the training where, oh, they're abreacting. It must be a Tuesday, right? And that's actually one of the first things we do in identity by design. One of the very first things that we teach you is abreactive role playing, where we literally have people role play abreactions.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we get that out of the way on the first day. Right. So by the end of halfway through the first day, the worst is already happening. Right. And once people get the idea, because the way it works is you've been taught an induction or a couple of inductions. And then you say, okay, now practice your inductions. And you as the subject at some random moment during that process, from the intro to the outro, you're just going to spontaneously abreact and act out and go crazy. And we've had to ship in cases of toilet paper. But by and large, after about the third or fourth spontaneous abreaction, that's explosive, because we chastise you if you don't like explode on your right? It's like, oh, okay. And you lose that butt pucker phenomena that scares so many of us, because that's one of the things why we don't practice.
Yeah, a big one.
We're afraid that if I open up Pandora's box, I'm not going to be able to handle Godzilla when she comes out.
Yep.
Right? So we're just going to throw Godzilla at you right off. So here, kill this dragon. Right?
So we're recording this mid-pandemic. Can you talk to me a little bit about this idea of getting over the fear of abreacting and working with people over Zoom? Do you think those
Yes.
two can correlate?
Yes.
Me too.
In fact, here's and the way you do it is you have to pre-frame what happens during an abreaction. You have to, again, if you're just taking clients willy-nilly over a Zoom interface, stop. Okay. You should not be taking a client that you have not done an actual consultation with so that you can get a read on their potential level of abreaction. There are certain processes we will not do, and we tell that client up front. And this is exactly what I say. I say the vast majority of our interventions work perfectly well over Zoom. There are certain types of interventions that we will not do over Zoom because we need to be more in control of the environment. And if I feel that is the case, I reserve the right to ask you to come in for a personal session. Okay. I'm going to run them through my consultation process, which is an evaluation of their emotional responsiveness. If they have a high degree of neurosis, they're highly prone to possibilities of abreactions. I will cherry pick the interventions that I do to significantly depotentialize or depotentiate that abreaction beforehand. So, and the way we do that is through resourcing and through blind technique, right? But even if they start to abreact, it's very simple. If you come from the classically trained school, you can always use "and the scene fades and you tend to your breathing." One of the things that we build in is that a couple of things you should always build in your sessions. A, if at any point we should lose internet connection, you will remain in trance long enough to complete whatever process you're engaged in, at which point you'll emerge from trance long enough to reestablish the internet connection, after which you'll go back into trance as deeply as the time before, and we'll continue with the next part of our process.
Wow.
So now all of a sudden they're going through their process, and all of a sudden there's this inordinate amount of quiet. And so now they have oh, wait, what's going on? Oh, and down they go. Right? So that's a help. If any, and I also give a disclaimer. If something comes up during this process that we didn't talk about, do you want me to fix it? Do you want me to help you resolve it? Or do you want me to just kind of put it back in the box and focus on what we did talk about? Now, 99 times out of 100, they're going to say, just fix whatever comes up, because they don't know why they're there. They think they do, but their unconscious mind knows exactly why they're there. And it knows already exactly what it's going to do the minute it gets an opportunity to resolve some stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's the puppet master, right? And so we front load those things. You let people know if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. If this should happen, this is what we're going to do, right? So you always let them know what to expect and what could happen, right? But here's the thing about real world hypnotists in general is when we see an abreaction, we get happy, because that's a Tuesday for us, right? And again, I'm not trying to say like we're better or whatever. It's just I know what people are going to deal with, and if I can't prepare, and my job as a trainer is to make their training harder than real life. So real life is just a Tuesday, right, or whatever. And so when people go abreactive, because remember, we're taught that most people, unless you're a regression therapist, a well-trained regression therapist, most people are taught to run screaming from abreactions. Mm-hmm. I run screaming towards them because it's the most direct route to the problem, right? And it's amazing how compliant people can be during an abreaction when the hypnotist talks like they actually know what they're talking about and giving directions, right? So like people start to abreact, and again, you should have safety resources built in. I use what we call the safe place induction, which is kind of a panacea for any kind of really explosive abreactive body feeling that they have. It doesn't always completely zero it out, but it takes the edge off to where it's now tolerable and manageable. So we build that right into the induction process. But all you got to do is have them point to where they feel it. The moment you have them point to where they feel it, you've disconnected them. You created a layer of dissociation from it, right? Because it's that rampant body feeling that they're associated into that they're responding to. The moment they point to where they feel it, now they've gone meta to it, right? And now it becomes just something you manage, right? Reach out, touch the picture, right?
Right.
Notice there's a color. And now you just start activating once again each of the sensory cortexes. And now you start building on-ramps, auditory, olfactory, visual to the same problem. And now you reach out to the dashboard, which is that proprioceptive grid we talk about. You make the picture bigger, smaller. You notice what direction the color's spinning or moving, what kind of metaphor they've created based on those 5 categories of information. And now you've got the whole system fine-tuned from a meta perspective, and at the same time still associated.
Wow.
And you can just have them manage it. And as long as you're guiding them, they can do it.
I had like 3 questions for you next, and they've all left me because I was trying to hold all 3 of them in my mind at the same time.
I'll come back.
Well, so will you talk to me about I run a lot of group sessions online. So in my mind, I don't want anyone who's listening to think that I'm shamelessly promoting your Identity by Design program, even though I kind of am because it sounds so life-changing. Is this something a person needs to show up in person for? And what are your thoughts? So we've talked a little bit about Zoom in the one-on-one context. What are your thoughts about Zoom in a group context? And I want to also pre-frame that by saying that I just heard you talk about this idea of entrainment and talking about that science shows that it can happen over Zoom.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it does. We've proven it. We've done it. There's a module that we only teach in our private trainings. It's called the state control module. And one of the things, and you can see a video of part of that. If you go to the YouTube channel and you look up empathic superpowers, you'll see what a process we call the sway test, which is a process through physics-based entrainment. We get rapport with another person's nervous system. And by imagining something in our own minds that affects our body, we activate their mirror neurons to follow. That's actually you can't see that in the video, but that's the underlying neural mechanism that's going on. It's based on the physics process of entrainment. We have people who are so scientifically rigorous in their mindset that they had a hard time wrapping their heads around this phenomena. And when you see it in the video, it looks local. I'm standing right next to a person and they're swaying back and forth. They don't know why they're swaying, right? But it's not local. It can be done from across a room. It can be done from across the planet once you understand the mechanics of it. And so what a lot of our students started playing with through it, because when COVID hit, we're still doing live events, by the way. We're probably one of the only trainers that are still doing live events in Las Vegas. We're there probably every month doing an event. In fact, we just finished Identity by Design, so you're going to have to wait. But one of the things that we started doing over Zoom was, well, how do we test this? How do we know this is actually true? And so people started doing the sway test on people in different parts of the world with the camera off, right? Because it's not about making somebody visually sway. It's about becoming aware enough of your body. Because when you get that kind of entrainment with another nervous system, there's a sensation that the body generates, and it's unique to each person. But part of the process in our state control module is becoming very, very familiar with that sensation, so you know when you've got it. Once you have it, any state change work that you do with intention will be picked up by the mirror neurons of the subject, and it'll reproduce those effects. So you're not trying to affect the other person directly, because that creates a firewall. Because there's a filter in people that separates self and other. You dissolve that filter through the entrainment process, and now you're not David and Lori, you're Dory, right? And so when I imagine something that causes my body to respond, it passes through that rapport connection, it stimulates their mirror neurons, and they reproduce to some degree what I'm doing. It works with state, it works with movement. But it's physics. It's not woo-woo, except for the non-local stuff. But even then, if you just think about the fact that your mirror neurons can pick up and process information they can't even see. Like if I can only see you from about the stomach upwards, right? But if your legs were crossed, part of my neurology would understand that your legs are crossed and would actually reflect that information in my neurology. It's bizarre. I don't know how it works, but the science is there. So that's what we base as evidence-based influence is what we talk about. But when you're doing this over Zoom, You have a visual component, you have an auditory component, you have intention. So all of these things in group settings work extremely well. You just have to learn how to there's just a few tweaks that you have to make.
Yeah, I was happy to hear you talk about that, because there are people from all around the world on my calls every week, and we start with a group rapport exercise where I have everyone place their hands on their heart and imagine going into the room of another person on the call and looking them in the eye. And it's just for one thing, it's like building this beautiful anchor for everyone there. So every time they do this, they feel that support of the group.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've experienced firsthand, I really get defensive when people talk about all the things you can't do over Zoom, because I think there's very little that you can't do over Zoom.
Absolutely.
And I just think it's a beautiful opportunity, especially with what we're going through with all the social distancing in the world. This is a place where you can come in and experience some of that.
Yeah. One of the things I was going to make a meme out of this, but I never got around to it. And it was something one along this lines. People need to start focusing on the reasons why they can rather than the reasons why they can't. Right.
Yep.
And it's just an attitude shift,
Yep.
right? That can dramatically change the results you produce in your life. And we were doing Skype sessions back. I was very resistant to Zoom for years. I knew about it, but I was hooked on Skype. And over 80% of our clients, even before COVID, were through Skype sessions. So we've been doing this, rigorously, clinically, with excellent results for decades, right? As we went to Zoom, and again, there were certain things that we had to figure out because there was nobody to teach us how to do these things on Zoom. But by and large, if you can name it and describe it, you can do it. If you give simple, clear instructions, tell people what to do, test them to see that they've done it, there isn't much you can't do in Zoom that you would do in a normal session.
I agree.
It really isn't.
David, you have mentioned that the basis of what you do inside I don't know if it's called an acupuncture clinic, if that's correct, but a lot of
what integrated health center. We have chiropractors, massage therapists, acupuncture, hypnosis.
And you said that a lot of what you do is teaching or speaking to, I'm not going to say this like you say it, but it's the physical pain that's a result of repressed trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe phrase that in the way that is
Sure.
appropriate, and then talk a little bit more about that underlying trauma, how
Sure.
easy or hard it is to fix it, and what happens when you do?
Mm-hmm. Well, the sexy scripting that I use is my specialty is dealing with physiological illness that has as its roots repressed emotion.
That was so much better.
Which basically means pretty much everything. Because the studies are there. It's been around since the 70s and 80s. I think there was a study called the ACE study, ACE, and it was about adverse childhood events. And it was an insurance company, I believe, that actually did this study. And what they discovered was that the majority, like 80% plus of all chronic illness could be traced back to some significant adverse childhood event. Brent Baum, who I studied holographic memory resolution with, told us that 80 to 90% of everything going into a doctor's waiting room is memory-based, which is our realm, right? We've processed an emotion, and we've processed an event. We've created a recording of it that we call a memory. We've coded that memory a certain way. There's a certain emotional charge connected to it. And for whatever reason, it got stuck in the system without being fully processed out, right? And so our job is to figure out where that is, find out what happened, what resources need to be applied or installed that allows that person to deal with that event or experience differently and release it from the body. When you do that, their symptoms go away.
Wow. And is this like a multiple session thing? Is this a 5-minute thing?
Depends on the person.
That's okay.
I a lot of times, again, this is kind of this might be an ethically gray area. There are certain things that I know I can fix in 10 minutes that I take an hour to do. And it's because the client needs to feel like they worked.
And I feel like they also, they've been struggling with it for so long. And the idea that it can be that simple and easy is, mm-hmm. I think can be really hard to wrap their head around.
It is. I'll give you an example. I had one lady who was referred to me by my wife, who's a chiropractor. She had this, I forget exactly what the main problem was, but we came in, we did a session, we fixed that. And then she was talking about a muscle pain that she had. So point to where you feel it. Took it out, spin it, went away. She was like, what? Huh? I had this for years. How did, and she started to feel bad because we took care of it so quick. She'd been struggling. It's like all of a sudden she was like, felt like an idiot. Right. I had that happen with a wonderful lady. I was doing a training out in Orlando with Richard, and we were practicing timeline. And this lady had trained in Italy, and she'd come to the training for Richard. And I just walked her, just very matter of factly walked her through a timeline process. And an issue she'd had for 20 years just went away. And she felt stupid. She felt bad about herself because I know that. How come I couldn't get rid of this?
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of times we have to organize our sessions in such a way that the client feels that they've earned the change. Right.
Yes.
And that something's it wasn't just, oh, you're an idiot. Here's the real, it's again, because that's a problem we have as neurolinguistic programmers is sometimes we like to make the patient wrong. Because we're smart. We just start meta modeling the words that come out of their mouth and make them feel like an idiot, defensive, and we need to, again, just because you can take something away in 10 minutes doesn't mean you necessarily should, right? One of the reasons I also tend to take a little bit longer with things is because sometimes there's other things connected. It's not always as simple, just take it out and spin it. Although many times, like when I'm pressed for time on an issue, it's like, I know I've got a client waiting or whatever, and I've been with this person for like 3 hours already. We'll just start spinning stuff and it'll go away and it won't come back. So there's a very powerful way to just organize your sessions to get the most done in the least amount of time. But sometimes we have to make a judgment call. That's one reason why I charge by the hour or by the minute, depending on what's going on, is because sometimes the client needs to talk for 45 minutes before they're ready to do a change process.
Yep.
And if you try to short circuit that, they actually get reactant on you. They actually resist the change process.
Yep.
So you have to take clients on a case-by-case basis, right? But a lot of times, and it started happening more as the YouTube channel started to get bigger and bigger, people wouldn't come to me with one thing. They would come to me with a list of 13 or 14 things that in a 90-minute session, which was the average session, that they wanted, and we would fix them all, right? We would fix every single one of them for one of several reasons. Many times that list of 13 things had the same root cause.
Yep.
And so the minute you nuked that root cause, it went away. And that was an uncovering process. Sometimes each one was just one individual discrete thing, and you could just blow it away with a spin, a magic frame, color breathing process. Sometimes gray room would take care of it. You take each person on a case-by-case basis, but the silo concept always gave the practitioner a framework to follow. And that's what a lot of classically trained hypnotists use progressive muscle relaxation for. I make a joke in my training that people use progressive relaxation because it calms down the therapist. Because most people are terrified of hypnotizing another human being. So it gives them a long 20-minute process to kind of get their head and their wits about them so that they can actually do the change. So we don't actually even teach progressive relaxation in Identity by Design. It's just therapeutically, it's not at the best use of time. We talk about it. It's easy to do. Most people who have previous training, they start defaulting to that. Like we start with you with the element induction, and then we go to faster inductions from then on. But the silo concept, that silo idea, first you do this, then you do this, then you do this. It tells them where to go next. And they get to pick which technique they think is most appropriate to the client. So it gives them a framework to follow, but at the same time, it gives them maximum flexibility to do it their way and the way the client needs them to do it. So it's the best, in my opinion, it's the best of both worlds. But I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Will you help me unpack the silo metaphor? Will you explain that a little bit deeper? Because I'm not sure I quite am picturing it, and I would like to.
Okay. Well, think of it like this. Have you ever done any play with web pages or built a web page?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you know how on a web page you have a home page, right? And then there's little topic pages that you have that, for your menu. And then each of those headings has a set of pages behind it that are subtopics or articles or drill downs to get more specific.
Yeah.
That's exactly what a silo is. A silo is, you have a change work process. It starts with general negativity. From there, you segue into the specific negativity. You click another page on the menu, and then you click another page and you go to your default driver states. You click another page. Once that's done, you go to changing your internal dialogue. So you have a voice in your head that's now building you up and telling you all the great things about yourself instead of one that's tearing you down all the time. When that's complete, you take them into temporal editing, which is sanitizing all that negative energy from your past, moving it over into the positive events so that when you look back on the past, you remember it in ways that empower you, make your life better. You install that. Again, you click the next link and you install that as a template at the genetic memory, right? Once you have that and you've tested it, you have a choice. You can either exit the process or you take it to the final step, which is what we call default or borrowed genius or inherited genius, where we take the qualities, traits, and attributes of people who are excellent in their field that you admire, that you want to be more like or have more of, and you build those traits into that template you've just spent the last silo creating. So it's even more customized and personalized. And to do the entire silo from soup to nuts by a competent practitioner takes around 90 minutes if you're fast. It's not a quick process in terms of, there's a lot going on. But you can do them in pieces. You can do them in any order. You could go from general negativity to temporal editing like that. You could go from specific negativity back to gray room over to pillars of power, which is the default driver state process. You can do them in any order as the client needs you to do them.
This is the Legos in different configurations. Okay.
Yeah. And they can stand alone or in sequence. But we borrowed this from stage hypnosis. We found, just like a stage hypnotist, the more you layer on the next skit, like you get them with a heavy hand, light hand, then maybe a good smell, bad smell, hot, cold. Each time they go through that next layer, you're getting a deeper layer of phenomena, but it's also deepening their ability to follow process. So we built that into the silo process. Each time you go through a set of a process, it prepares you and deepens you for the next one. And plus, law of compounding. By the time you hit the end of that silo, you've compounded all the things you did in the gray room so much, right? So that all these things are built in. You don't actually need to know. I don't actually tell people this is all the things that are going on. You don't need to know all that to be able to do it. And that's why I always teach NLP last, because most of us don't want to know how to design a car, which is what NLP training is about.
Right.
It's about learning how to design shit and deconstruct it, things of that nature. Most of us just want to be able to make change. We want to drive the car, right? And to be a great neurolinguistic programmer, be a great hypnotist first.
I'm curious how this process has evolved over time for you. When did you start Identity by Design, and how has it progressed over the years? Identity by Design
started, the original name of the process was called Attractivation. We did it as a one-off training. Well, first I first designed it for my meetup group, and then for my mastermind group. And we taught it, and people were just blown away. And then what happened was I took the video of that mastermind group, I edited down to just the change work segments, each of the 7 stages. I put it on a DVD, and I said, and I gave it to my wife. I said, go through this and tell me what you think. I didn't hear from her again for like 3 hours. She walks into the study 3 hours later and hands me a check for $200. Because at that time we had a rule that we paid each other for our change work. She literally handed me a check from watching the videos, and was like, holy cow. She was like amazed. So I was like, oh, maybe there's something to this, right? And so at another mastermind, I did the work on a gentleman by the name of Luis, and he came back like the next month and said everything in his life changed. He was in his late 50s. His wife had dumped him, ran off to Paris with this guy. He was getting all kinds of crap at work. His self-esteem was in the toilet. He just didn't have a whole lot going for him at the time. And we walked him through this process, and he came back the next month, said people were treating him differently at work. He was starting to see people again. He was happy. And I was like, I designed this for pickup artists, right? And once again, poof, got these full scope transformations that have nothing to do with that particular application. And so we just started using it clinically, and it's been amazing because, and I think one of the reasons that it puts out such great practitioners, and again, I'm purely speculating, I don't actually know, but I see it over and over and over again, that the people who come in at the beginning of the training are dramatically different people than the people who come out on the other end of that 5 days. But I think a lot of it is just because you're doing that 3x3 protocol, you're cleaning up your own stuff, you're experiencing the transformation while at the same time learning how to guide other people through it. So you're learning this change work process from both sides.
Did you find that to be true when you were doing this for the pickup artist community as well?
We didn't get a chance to do a lot of it for the pickup artist community, but one of the reasons was we realized what we had so fast, we just took it therapeutic. We still taught it. I guess going back to your original question, we did 2 trainings with very small classes, and we taught it as a coaching for coaches, as a way for coaches to kind of build these processes into their coaching program. And it worked really, really well, but it was a very small class. And then we changed it to identity by design, and we started adding in the conversational hypnosis, the instant and rapid inductions, things of that nature. But yeah, we designed it for pickup artists. We designed it for people who wanted to be more adept in social situations. But we found out very, very quickly that it was able to do that beyond just that narrow dating, mating, and relating application. If you wanted to be a hypnotist, this is going to make you a great hypnotist. You want to be a great mediator or negotiator, this is going to make, and it had nothing to do with the linguistic influence techniques, it had everything to do with how you ran this and how you organized it and the identity that you carried inside of you. Because we're all kind of fighting this, I don't want to use a martial metaphor, we're all fighting this battle between the identity that people want us to have and the one we want. And because we were inflicted with these beliefs about who we should be at an age where we didn't understand what was going on, we didn't have the resources or the cognitive perceptibilities or willpower to say no, these things were imprinted on us when we largely had no defense. And so one of the things that happens to people, especially people who come to the hypnosis or however you're doing it, there's a part of you that wants to be you, the authentic you, that wants to have influence and power, make a difference in the world. And sometimes who that is in conflict with the person you were taught to be. So the identity by design process allows you to transition from the person the world wants you to be to the person you want to be. Wow. By targeting the different aspects and building blocks of your personality and identity that created that in the first place and allowing you to customize it. And I think that's what makes people so good. In addition to 3x3 and what we call bullet point hypnosis and hypnosis and free fall concepts that are also part of the training. But I think it's just going through the silo from both ends, multiple times, that creates that powerful inner transformation that leads to the ability and willingness to do these things outside in the real world.
This is so awesome. So if it's okay, I want to segue into a totally different place. And this is more for my gratification. I realized that one of the benefits of creating a podcast, which I did kind of spontaneously before I felt ready, is getting to have an audience with people like you who I've been watching on the screen, and you have almost a celebrity status to me. And I've told you a couple times that I have channeled my inner David Snyder, and that I have utilized the things that you have taught me. And you mentioned earlier that one of the best ways to internalize a new learning is to teach it. So yes. I actually had my Trancy Tuesdays group session this morning, and I said, this is what I learned from David Snyder last week, and I am going to teach it to you today. And so what I want to talk about, just in the context of my audience who struggles with this imposter monster. And there's this idea, especially prevalent in this community, and I would imagine it's probably prevalent everywhere, about copycatting people. And so I'm always careful to give credit, but I have my favorite protocol, I call it the 3 Bs, and I based it on the as if principle by Richard Wiseman and Amy Cuddy's TED Talk, talking about how when we change our body language, it changes everything. And then you and I were in a Clubhouse room the other day, and as you started speaking, I thought, oh my gosh, I stole this all from David Snyder. This is from when I was binge watching David Snyder videos. So will you just talk to me a little bit about your perspective on copying others and that fear of copying others that keeps people from stepping into their passion and their calling in this world?
Well, first of all, I don't know a single human being who came out of the womb fully self-actualized, or didn't learn something from somebody else, right? You and I both learned to read and write English, and we read and write English every day. Are we copying from the people who created English? Right? Yes, but we're also standing on the shoulders of giants. We're standing on the shoulders of people who laid a foundation for us that gave us an ability and a platform to learn something powerful and an opportunity to go further. So one of the things that has always been, and it's rampant in the NLP world, the martial arts world, is everybody invented everything.
Yeah.
Right? Horseshit. But that's just my, my erudite, but here's the thing. You're never going to go wrong teaching something and telling people where you got it.
Right.
Right? Because you're paying respect to the source. And I tell people all the time, I take credit for the synthesis, not the source. Right? I give you my reading list. I tell you where I learned it. If I'm telling you a story that's not directly mine, I'll tell you, I once heard this story from Kenrick Cleveland or Mark Cunningham or one of my more infamous mentors, right? I think it's important to honor the fact that copying is the way human beings learn. We emulate, we mimic, that's how we understand things. Mimicry is such an important part of the human process of learning and communicating. So when you know you're saying something that, or teaching something that came from somebody else, tell them where you got it. You're never going to go wrong. Because even though you tell them where you got it, there will be a small select number of people who will look for that resource to see what other gold nuggets might be in that resource. Mm-hmm. The rest of them will just associate that information with you anyway. Right? And as far as the imposter syndrome goes, what I have seen, what I've experienced is that the imposter syndrome is relative to the people you're associating with in that moment. For example, when you're in front of a group of people who can't even spell hypnosis, you feel like the expert. But when you're associating with someone like me, who you spend a lot of time studying from, right? Yeah. So this idea of imposter syndrome, a couple things. It's always relative, and it never actually goes away.
I agree.
It never actually goes away. It just changes a threshold. Right? I promise you, if I get on a panel with Richard Bandler and John Grinder, I am not going to feel like the number one guy in the world right now. You know what I'm saying? It's just not going to happen, right? I get in a room sometimes with some of these guys on Clubhouse. Like for some reason, there's a couple of people who follow NLP and hypnosis who are also big in the advertising and media buying space. And every time they see me pop, because I study all forms of human influence. That's kind of, if I had a niche, that's what it would be, is specialized human influence technologies. That's what I do. NLP being one of them, in which case I happen to have some level of notoriety, right? But I always tell people I was a great hypnotist before I was a great neurolinguistic programmer. And I think that's the optimal way to train. So if you come to me to learn NLP, it'll be the last thing I teach you. Unless you prove to me right off the bat that you are an awesome hypnotist, right? And I will test you, but that's a different issue. But like if I get pulled up on these stages with, guys who buy billions of dollars in media, people I learned internet marketing from. I was on I started learning internet marketing back in 2004, 2005. And one of the people I studied with was Frank Kern and Ed Dale. I was on a platform with Ed Dale being asked my opinion about advertising from Ed Dale. And I was like, stay control. I'm a winner, right? And I'm sitting there feeling like the world's biggest phony. What am I doing on a stage with Ed Dale, right? And I've had that opportunity now. I didn't. I wanted to be on. Sorry, calm down, David. I was on Clubhouse the other day, and Marcel Klein was doing a Clubhouse room with Chase Hughes, who is now a friend of mine. Turns out he was also a big fan that I didn't know until I actually showed up at his training. Yeah. And he was a huge fan of mine. And I've been promoting his book in my Killer Influence class for 2 or 3 years. And he'd found out about that and was really excited. So it's kind of a weird thing. And we're actually starting to do more and more collaborations as time goes on, because his stuff is very complementary to what I do, and vice versa.
Yeah, he's amazing. You should tell him to come on my show.
I will mention it to him. He keeps fist bumping me on my text messages. So, but so I wanted to see I wanted to hear Chase, right? But Marcel knows me. He's a 22-year-old dude who binge watched my videos, right? Kind of like you, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and I feel like an old man when I see these 22-year-old kids who are really, really good, and then they say, I started by watching your videos, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like this old dude. I'm like Milton Erickson or some shit. I'm like 20. I'm 70. Like, how did this happen? There was a time when I was the renegade. Now I'm like the source. I'm like, shit.
Yeah.
That's very surreal for me. Still, after all these years, it's very surreal. It's fun, but I still think I'm not done. So, so take that for what it's worth. But anyway, so I log in to listen to Chase. Next thing I know, I'm up on stage with Chase Hughes.
I saw you there.
And and the questions are bouncing back and forth, and he's deferring to me, and I'm like, I'm not supposed to be here. In my head, I'm like, and then finally, it's like you reach a point where it's like, okay, you're here, lean into it, right? And so every chance I could, I deferred back to Chase, and then Chase had to log off, and I wound up teaching in that room for like another half hour, 45 minutes, something like that, and people were having a great time. But who was I to be? I mean, yeah, I have credentials, but I don't have, a Netflix special coming out or anything like that. And I have lots of courses, but, so when you feel like an imposter, realize that it's okay.
Yeah.
Just give the best you can. When you start, again, imposter syndrome, by the way, is you focusing more on yourself than on delivering value to your audience.
Yes.
So if you just turn it around and say, hey, I have these feelings, but you know what? You're here, you paid your money, or you took the time out of your day to show up. I'm going to give you, I love you. Thank you so much for being here, for seeing value. I'm going to give you as much as I can. And I'm going to make sure that you come away feeling fed, feeling like, hey, somebody paid attention. Somebody gave me something that I could really use. And regardless of that imposter feeling, go forward anyway. Because the bravest, every human being I know feels fear. It's what they are, or they feel like they're not quite what everybody thinks, right? Because you see your own imperfections. In the early days of identity by design, we had this concept we called the acceptance, rejection, projection, connection. And the way it works is that you come into this world with no self. As far as from an infant's perspective, everything is you. The concept of self and other is very alien. We don't come to that until much later in our neuroevolution. So everything is you, right? Whether you're in the womb or not, it's just you just changed. So everything goes in unchallenged and is eventually reorganized. But what happens is, based on the external input from those sources, father, mother, environment, we start to create a self-concept. Okay. And part of our spirit, part of our consciousness reflects on that self-concept. And it makes a judgment about because it confuses that self-concept with itself. This is again, goes to core Buddhism, is just peeling back these layers of reflection. But this is where it starts. We have ourself, then we have something that reflects what we've been taught or learned about ourselves into a self-image, and we make judgments of it. And then our neurology simultaneously projects that value judgment inward and outward simultaneously. And so we project onto people what we see inside of ourselves and assume they see it the same way.
Yeah.
Right? But they don't, because they're too wrapped up in their own inner projection. If we evaluate that self-concept and we find ourselves loved and worthy and deserving of love, then everyone we meet tends to treat us that way. Yeah. Or we perceive their behaviors as supplying and reinforcing that mindset. If we see someone who's not worthy, who's worthy, untrustworthy, or has no willpower, or just doesn't deserve success and is fearful, the people around us tend to take on the behaviors that magnify those traits and qualities. but it starts inside of us. And there's some good science from the University of Minnesota that kind of takes this even further. I won't go into it here, but I talk about it enough on my YouTube channels, especially on the ones dealing with attraction, where you can find that. But honestly, we're always projecting out into the world how we want other people to treat us, and also who we believe they are based on that internal projection mechanism. And people tend to take on the behaviors that we assign to them unconsciously.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is the prime real estate, but this is organized and deeply influenced by this. So we get this right, this follows, and everything else goes after that.
I love that. And I realize we've been chatting for a while. So I'm just going to plant this seed because I've always been curious as I listen to you speak in your various YouTube videos, you'll hint at spirituality. And so I would be intrigued to know, and maybe if you even want to just shoot out a couple books that a person could look at. I've noticed an interesting concept of spirituality among hypnotists. It's almost like we understand the science underneath this, but then we know there's something a little bit more woo going on. And hypnosis has actually segued into a really beautiful new sense of spirituality for me. So if you would like to say anything on that, I would love to hear it. Otherwise, we can edit this out.
Well, first and foremost, I have a deeply spiritual side. I make no secret that I'm a student of Hermetic philosophies, principles, and practices. I've been a practitioner of Taoist, energetic, and alchemical arts practically since I first learned about it, which is in my teens. I've studied Huna, I've studied Reiki. I've been a Reiki master since before Reiki was cool. I studied Kabbalah before Madonna even heard of Kabbalah. So I'm very much a prima donna. And I integrate all of these things into my advanced classes that we call vibrational influence. But the problem is that when you're talking about the application of energies and spirituality and things of that nature, it's one of the few areas where energetic phenomena can be, or suggestion can be mistaken for energetics. And the truth of suggestion is that words have energy to them, and energy can be molded through words. So there are two sides of the same coin. Ironically, or sadly, for many years, I think it's starting to change now. I'd like to think a lot of it is because of the YouTube channel that we have that brought hypnosis and NLP back into the public eye, where it was rapidly losing, aside from Tony Robbins, it was rapidly losing any kind of presence in the self-help community. I'd like to think that the things that we're doing are kind of behind that resurgence and reactivation of hypnosis and NLP in the transformation world. But for decades, and it's probably still true in a lot of ways, hypnosis, if you tried to look up hypnosis, the only place you would find it was in the occult section or the new age section. It was considered woo-woo. It was considered spiritual in nature by definition. There was little to no scientific work written on it. There's a few, but by and large, in modern times, the last 20, 30, 40 years, if you would go to ClickBank, for example, where I used to sell a lot of digital products, you wouldn't find hypnosis in like business or education. You'd find it in the new age section, right? So there's always been this bias of hypnosis. But one of the reasons is because hypnosis is one of the arts or one of the practices that was embraced by both magicians and doctors back in a time when there was no difference between a shaman and a healer. Right? In fact, the entire history of Oriental medicine, acupuncture, goes back to shamanism, where the practice of putting a needle in somebody's skin was designed to let the bad spirit out. So there's always been this use of altered state work and hypnagogia, as it's called in the Hermetic systems. One of the very first things you learn as a practitioner in those arts is the art of suggestion, right? But once again, you have a lot of people out there selling energy systems that are largely based on their ability to deliver suggestions rather than actual energetically based phenomena. So I created training programs that take the things that we do at a practical level, allows you to create an actual consistent result mechanically, while at the same time laying a foundation inside of you to do these more woo applications. But what it's really doing is it's evolving your nervous system to be able to interface with the non-local universe that the physicists talk about much more effectively. So it gives you ability to place orders with the universe that the universe will fulfill. So
I love that.
And there's no top level, there's no top end to that. You are inherently a spiritual being having a human experience. But that spiritual continuum is interlocking, intercommunicating layers of density. And in order for that to happen, those intercommunicating layers of density or vibrational substance have to have a common language for them to interact. And so once you figure out what that common language is and you learn how to speak in it, then you develop the ability to move beyond just what you can do with a spoken word, but then what you do with a spoken word becomes tremendously more amplified and magnified because the neurology that's delivering it is more evolved. So wow. there's a system of processes that we teach in one context that lay the foundation for development and application in others. But we start with people, we take people where they're at. In other words, most people who come to our trainings are proactive. In other words, they have something they want to solve. They have something they want to fix. They have an outcome they want to achieve, and they want techniques specifically for that. So that's what we give them. And then as they get those needs satisfied, they have space for other higher, more, I don't want to use the word, but evolved applications, for lack of a better word, that lead towards becoming more of the person you came here to be in the first place. But yeah, I've always had a very strong spiritual side. And it's always been at war with my need to not drink too much Kool-Aid.
Right.
And so I err on the side of only teaching things that we have a way to test and that provide a consistent result that don't require belief. And then as you go through our training programs and you start to learn how to trust your meat suit more and more because you've evolved your neurology, you've learned how to work with those internal dynamics and how to decode the information it's giving you. Then you can start playing with things that are a bit more challenging to test. Like, for example, in our vibrational influence classes, right, where we teach remote viewing and we teach remote influencing. One of the things that we do, especially we teach the remote viewing so we can get you to the remote influencing, because that's really what we want. I would much rather create the future than predict it.
Yes.
Right. That's just kind of the mindset of people who find us are going into. So I've studied different forms of divination. I still do, but I don't use them. I study them to learn the other side, the other aspects of things. How do I create a future? Right. Yes. That's what I want to know. Right. Here's how I predict the future. This is what I'm going to make happen. Or I'm going to cause to happen. Right. And I have the tools to make the universe understand and listen to me, and my students do too. And to do that, I have to sort from among thousands sometimes of different sources, different studies to find one gold radioactive nugget that I can put in my little bag as a Lego and put it together. But like, for example, when you come to vibrational healing and you're going to learn remote influence, it presupposes that you can do that rapport connection drill that I talked about earlier, where you entrain and then you send things back and forth. It's the exact same mechanic you would use to contact source. It's the exact same mechanic. It's just a different target, right? They're not different because as above, so below. The same patterns exist at various forms of human experience if you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Everything is just an extension of what came before. So when you come to vibrational influence, you have that coming in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hook you up to machines. We're going to take your blood pressure. We're going to take your heart rate, your body temperature, and we're going to pair you up. And we're going to have these little bowls with chits in them, and there are little things written on them. One will say raise blood pressure, another will say lower blood pressure. One will say raise body temperature, one will say lower body temperature. One will say do nothing, right? One will say increase pulse, lower pulse, right? And then person goes off in the corner. You have your target, you have your influencer. Person randomly draws what they're supposed to do. They go through their process. They finish the process. We take blood pressure readings, pulse rates, and we compare.
Wow.
Did you get the result or didn't you? right? Because one of the things we need to understand about the subconscious mind is it thrives on feedback. We know as a hypnotist, the unconscious mind wants to please, but if you don't give it a baseline, if you don't give it something to compare against, it doesn't know how to navigate. So you have to find ways to test these things, right? And so you eventually get to the point in all forms of spiritual aspects, mysticism, energy, whatever, where it becomes harder and harder to test. But when you reach that point, if you've done a lot of testing up to that point, now you have a little bit more, I don't want to use this word, but faith in the information or the phenomena that you're generating because of all the testing you've done previously in real world situations and applications. So we try to give you that feedback mechanism, right? Just like the tally sheets, right? If you learn, you go through a 5-day training, right? And most people, when they come out of a 5-day training, they've learned maybe 1 or 2 interventions and 6 or 7 different ways to induce trance, right? Because the emphasis is on getting people into trance, not what to do with them once you get them there, right? Big problem, right? A monkey can put someone into trance, usually by throwing poo at them, but that's a different topic, right? But what do you do with these people once you got them there?
Right.
What's your ability to manage the trance? And that's what we spend a lot of our time on. It's not getting them the trance. I use one induction. I can do any induction I see because I've been doing this for so long. And you have your whole life to learn as many inductions as you want. What are you going to do with these people when they're in trance in front of you, right? So manage the trances. Same thing starts to happen when we go through these processes for spirituality is, how well do we know ourselves and how much trust do we have in this mechanism that we've developed to know we can get a result, and that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And you don't even have to believe in yourself for it to work. You just have to be relentless.
I love that word, relentless. I was listening to a podcast on a train in Paris a few years ago, and I heard, I think it was Ed Milet use the phrase relentless consistency. And it has that latched onto my neurology and has stuck with me in a way that, I'm not nearly as consistent as I would like to be, but the moments of consistency that I have been able to harness and the relentlessness that I have utilized to move forward has just been, it's a game changer, especially for a person who wants to be an entrepreneur.
And again, you got to remember that if you're going to put yourself out there are people who are going to love you and there are people who are just not.
Yes.
There are people out there who are going to be offended because you breathe the same air that they do. Don't let them steal your dreams. All they want is your attention. That's all. Just keep going. If you love what you do, you're passionate, you will find a tribe that resonates with that, right? And going back to this idea of relentlessness, in our field especially, there's a lot of talk about confidence and the need to be confident to be successful. It's a lie. You don't need to be confident to be successful. You need to be relentless, right? Because if you stop for a moment and think about your life, there have been times in your life where shit had to get done. And you had absolutely zero confidence in your ability to do it. But shit had to get done. So you sucked it up and you did it. In those moments, when did the confidence come?
When you were done.
When you were done.
Process.
Yeah. So if you're just like those chronically overtrained people where you're waiting to be something before you can do something, or to feel something before you can do something, you'll never start. You need to have a desire and a relentless drive to succeed no matter what. I have seen the most talented, genius level people begging for change because they crumple the minute any kind of adversity gets in their way, any kind of perceived block comes up. They crumple, they stop, they quit. You never fail until you quit. You never fail until you quit. So if you just don't quit, you can take a break, you can take a rest and get up off your ass, dust yourself off and keep going, right? There's an old Buddhist saying to fall 7 times and rise 8. Life starts from now, right? Rocky Balboa epitomized that more than any character that I can think of. It didn't matter how hard he got hit. He just kept getting up, right? That's what life is about. That's what success is about. And anybody who tells you otherwise is trying to sell you something, usually a coaching program, right? But the truth is when people say they want to be confident, my experience has been what they're really saying is, I want to stop being afraid.
Wow.
Right. And here's the thing about, and this kind of closes a loop I opened earlier. Some of the most successful people in the world I know have fear. They're afraid. They have fear, and they're still successful. Why? It's because it's what you do when you feel the fear that defines the direction your life takes. Every motherfucker on the planet has fear.
Yeah.
Right? One of my more infamous mentors, Mark Cunningham, used to say, the only fearless motherfuckers I know are dead. Right? So it's not about this idea of not having fear, of not having confidence. It's about having a desire and a relentless drive to do it. Whatever it takes, whoever I need to be, whatever the cost, make the payment, right? Do the work, be relentless, enjoy the ride, and never lose sight of the destination, but enjoy the ride, And if you do that, whether you make $1 million or, it's just a well-funded hobby, you'll feel good about it. Yes. You'll be making a difference in the world commensurate with the mission you came here to fulfill, right? And you're going to have tough spots. There's going to be long, dark nights of the soul. And more often, this came from my teacher, Lillian Bridges, my face reading teacher. All that's necessary during those long, dark nights of the soul is to just keep going. Mm. And when you emerge, you'll emerge fundamentally different and changed in a way you couldn't have been changed any other way. Nothing in this life is random. Nothing. But we do have tremendous choice over the direction we choose, or the path we take to get to the destinations. So I hope that helps for what it's worth.
That helps so much. And it's so timely because I am speaking to you from a brand new apartment. Well, it's not brand new. It's brand new to me because my apartment flooded last week and I lost everything.
Oh my goodness.
And it was such a, I didn't necessarily think a higher power did it or a lower power did it or any of that. But I thought it's what you said a moment ago. How am I going to respond to this? And what future am I going to create in response? And it was just this roller coaster of me changing my state and me telling myself that this is going to be okay. And then these moments of just sobbing and mm-hmm. thinking, I didn't want this to happen. Mm-hmm. So, but I've just kept stepping through and I'm still stepping through. And so it just, for me personally, it's so beautiful that you just said that. And I'm so grateful that everyone listening gets to, I'm sure it applies to every single person here has a place they can apply what you just said. So I'm so grateful to you, David. This is incredible.
Thank you. It's been the backbone of my entire career, because I have been betrayed, I've been lied to, I've had things not work, I've had disasters come out of nowhere. Every now and then I find myself about to look at the universe and go, why are you doing this to me? Right. And then I realize I'm asking the wrong fucking question. Right. Just focus on what you want, decide who you want to be, and be willing to do whatever it takes to be that person or get that result. And just move forward, whether you're moving forward an inch at a time or a step, you're still moving forward. One of my other mentors, Lisa Sasevich, this is one of the greatest things I ever heard from her, and it sticks with me to this day. I've had a lot of great female mentors, by the way. Especially people think because I come from a pickup and seduction background that I'm a little bit on the chauvinistic side. I've learned so much from women. It's ridiculous. I actually have a set of honorary ovaries, but I love rom-coms, for Christ's sake. I mean, Jesus Christ, they don't even make them anymore, right? But what she said was this, and it goes to the relentless thing. The greatest GPS in the world can't help you if you stay in one spot. Right? Another one of my mentors, Taylor Sinclair, passed on to me a saying she got from her mother. Says, you can be or do or have anything you want in this life, but first you have to become a person for whom that thing can happen to. Right? So it's all about, what do you want? Who do you want to be? What are you willing to do to get there? Because the stronger the want, how did I used to say this? The stronger the want to, the more the how to tends to take care of itself.
Right. I agree.
Right. So just ask the right questions. But anyway, yeah, you're awesome. I mean, I remember watching you walking by me every year at HypnoThoughts. I'm like, oh, she's cute. I wonder what's going on with her, right? And now all of a sudden, poof, here we are, right?
Well, and I was looking at you thinking, oh my gosh, it's David Snyder. David Snyder just made eye contact.
I had no idea you were a fan.
Oh,
I had no idea, right? So it's you can't predict how people are going to connect or reconnect, right? And just realize that every time you reach that peak, you see that peak off in the distance and you reach it and you think you're done, you'll see the next peak and you'll be just as inspired to go for that one, because it means you're going to be something different. You're going to be something better, not necessarily in terms of quality, but in terms of what you're capable of, or the scope or the capacity that you can bring to the world. And I think that's something we sometimes lose track of. We get so distracted by the mechanics of running our business and the tasks that need to be performed. We forget to stop and take joy in the process, right? And I think that's what leads to burnout, is when you forget your why, and just enjoying it, right? And if you're doing the things that light up your spirit, again, we're coming back to that whole spiritual thing, right? In Taoist mysticism and Taoist spirituality, we have this concept known as Ming. Ming means destiny. And that equates to what we in face reading call the golden path. Each and every human being on this planet has what we call an original face. An original face is that spiritual spark of the divine that came here with a purpose to fulfill and took on the body you're in right now to do that, along with your talents, your skills, your abilities, your phobias, your fears, your anxieties, your worries, every bit of it you came in with, or with the potential for, to allow you to evolve and do something in some way, to move your life in a certain direction. And when you start following that path and you start doing the things that light up your heart, make your heart sing and make your eyes beam, you start moving on to that Ming destiny path, or the golden path that was laid out before you took on a body. And as you do, you tend to live longer, you tend to look younger, things start to unwrap for you almost by accident, almost like happy coincidences just start to pile up, right? And that's how you know you're actually doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? Does it light you up on the inside? If it doesn't, it's probably not your path, right? And so part of our job when we get onto that spiritual path is to actually review our past and reclaim the things that lit us up that other people told us we couldn't do. Reclaim those lost loves and reclaim that part of yourself. And then your life becomes magical, and the universe conspires to bring you more success, to let you evolve faster and deeper, and you tend to live longer.
David, thank you so much. This has exceeded all my incredibly high expectations, and I'm so grateful. Before we say goodbye, is there anything that you want to impart to the listener that we haven't already said?
If you're not following Lori on Clubhouse, be sure you do. If you're not listening to her podcast, why not? Right? It's always a pleasure to speak and to interact with you, Lori, and to do things with you. So I'm excited to be here. It was been an honor and a pleasure. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, David. And I will have in the notes wherever you are watching or listening how to get in touch with David. And for anyone who isn't going to go into those notes, David, can you just tell us quickly how to interact with you in the future, how people can find Identity by Design or the other trainings that you have?
So the fastest way to do it is to call my administrative goddess, Stephanie. And the number for the office is 858-282-4663. I'll say it 3 times. 858-282-4663. One more time with feeling. 858-282-4663. For those of you who are not familiar with my work and would like to have an opportunity to kind of sample it for yourself, I recommend you check out our YouTube channel, David Snyder at YouTube, David Snyder NLP at youtube.com. Once you've just done that, or you decide you want to see a little bit more about what kind of trainings and courses we offer, there is an events calendar on my website, as well as a very, very well-stocked product store. Go to www.nlppower.com. That's www.nlppower.com. One more time, www.nlppower.com. If you want to go to the events page, just go /events, and it'll take you to the master calendar. If you want products, just click on the little products tab, and it'll take you into our store. And again, if you have questions, give us a call at 858-282-4663. We always recommend that before you buy anything, call us first and tell us what you want to accomplish, because then we can give you the shortest distance between where you are and where you want to be.
And if you're outside the US, as I know many of you listening are, you just add a 1 to the beginning of that phone number to
I always forget that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people outside the US, and I'm grateful to every one of them. David, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I look forward to see you again on Clubhouse and wherever else our paths may cross.
I'm so grateful you've listened all the way to the end. What is one tiny action step you'll take now based on an aha moment you got during the podcast? Maybe that life-changing action step is to come accept the gift I have for you at theimpostermonster.com. Head there right now to get your powerful hypnosis audio, The Answer Room. That lets you make important decisions and get crystal clear about your next step forward on this path of purpose in your one great and precious life.